still see you, and we understand that we're still thinking about you and hopefully actively working to make your lives better. So thank you for being here. And thank you for coming back to LA. We want to welcome you. Your amazing book, The Power of Pause. That's extension of a movement that you started. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that movement and sort of where you started with this work.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. Hi.
Because she says I started this movement. I definitely started this one, but I think one of the reasons this conversation is so special in particular is because Eve, if you've read Fair Play, really started the work of creating a cultural dialogue around the value of care and how it's been grossly undervalued and written off in our culture. So introduce yourself.
Yes, I just came from a funeral, so I'm thinking about this pretty existentially, where the most powerful speech was about this woman and that she was selfless and made her partner a sandwich every day for 50 years. But I didn't learn anything about her. I knew nothing about her after the speeches. So I'm feeling sad and angry actually about it. And that's what my work's about, that women are defined as by their roles as parents, partners, and professionals. We're not allowed to be anything else outside of those roles. The second we have a child, we get a metaphorical and physical initial to wear our children's names around our neck. I don't fucking do that. I wear my own name around my neck. And that's it. Or yeah, if your child is the same as yours, that's double bonus. Yeah. And so I think existentially, I'm thinking a lot about that. But I think what I love about your work, Neha, is that we get into these places of assumption, or as one woman told me, what Fair Play taught her was that she didn't have a magical vagina that whispered in her ear what her husband's mother wanted for Christmas. And so I think the assumptions, right, about what a stay-at-home mom is or what a working mom is, it's the assumptions, right, that lead to the three most toxic words that I heard in my surveys, and we'll talk about your data. And those three most toxic words that we asked women over sort of the early course of their lives was, how are you going to manage with your partner? And we asked men this too, work and family. And the three most toxic words are, we're going to figure it out. You don't figure shit out. It doesn't work like that, right? What happens is that you just fall back into the assumptions of the magical vaginas. And then we end up in places that we didn't expect to be, or as I call the accidental traditionalist, which is what I was, or a harried parent, or, all the different things that we call these tropes. So I think what is so beautiful, we'll talk about, is sort of existentially, metaphorically, but also systematically, that if you look at how you end bias, it's through narrative change. It's what you're doing. And it's taking assumption and replacing it with structured decision-making tools, which is also what you're doing. So I really appreciate your work. And I think these false binaries that we get ourselves in not only keep us stuck, but they serve a late-stage capitalist patriarchy, which is where we all, the world, the context in which we all exist. So I want to just thank you for writing The Power of Pause. And I want to know a little bit about, that false binary of the stay-at-home mom, the working mom, this whatever that weird mommy wars blog posts were, or the BuzzFeed titles about that. Why do we fall into false binaries? Is it because we need clickbait in a place where there's an attention gap, we don't read anymore? Or have there always been these false binaries, and how are you trying to break them?
We love clickbait, and media loves a catfight.
Yes.
We love pitting women against each other. So we were ripe, mothers were ripe for that, right? Because we always want to know we're doing the best for our families. There's nothing that could get at us more than thinking we're making the wrong choice for our children. So when you start saying one side is better than the other, when one side is like creating secure attachment over here and one side is modeling ambition over here, the reality is all the data in the world, if you need this, go to Stuart Friedman's article in Harvard Business Review, says that careers impact your children zilch. right? It's having, whether you work in the home, out of the home, exist in between, great outcomes for your children. And the reality is, especially the modern reality, is we're ever shifting and we're ever evolving and we're actually all existing on this like very long continuum. But I think where it all came from is, if you look back in the 1970s, we made this tremendous progress, right? To show that we had capacity in the workforce.
Absolutely.
And that was such big movement to say, okay, the working mother is out here creating a new path for women. But what we did was we left anyone choosing to care for their children or their family for a chapter with apron strings, with the idea of defending tradition. And that was the 1970s. So at the same time, you were seeing the boom of advertising, right? Print advertising. So and there were vacuum cleaners and dishwashers and Betty Crocker cake mix and all these things that were making life easier. So they were advertising these women walking around with, a pink corded phone, wearing cute heels, serving cocktails at the end of the day. And so we ended up with this character of a woman of leisure martyring herself to her family. Flash forward to now, right? And in our research, and we commissioned a survey in 2023, American Mothers on Pause spoke to 1,000 members of the general population, 1,200 at-home parents. Of those 1,000 members of the general population, if you ask them who they think of as a stay-at-home mom, they will say June Cleaver. That is a character from the 1950s, housewife, Leave It to Beaver. You ask them who they think of as a working mother, they will say Michelle Obama, Sheryl Sandberg, and Beyonce, right? Like huge power chasm.
Right. Yes.
And we never caught up to date. We never caught up to date to the fact that there is no one right choice. And we actually all do exist in between. We're having children older. So the average age of the parent having a kid is 30, and that skews older on the coast, which means you've clocked in a decade in your career. You're not tripping and falling into motherhood with no foundational experience. Dads are spending 3 times the amount of time. I know it could be more, but they are more involved and engaged than any generation prior. So they're not serving them cocktails at the end of the day. And they have access to digital tools and technology. I'm looking around the room. I know so many of you are in freelance and consulting and creators and authors. And the world was due for a new narrative, and hopefully a narrative that just brings us together. Because it's not to say a pause is the right choice. It's to say it is one choice in the long game.
So can you define the power pause? You do that in the beginning of the book?
Yeah. So a power pause is the idea of making room for other priorities, whether that be childcare, elder care, mental health, physical health. And in doing that and shifting away from paid work, actually finding room to expand your network, expand your interests, expand your sense of self, so that when and if you're coming back to the workforce, you're actually coming back with a stronger sense of self than ever before.
And so I think what's so beautiful about this book is, again, narrative change is really important. And so tell me a little bit about the period. So you have lots of different structured decision-making tools for people. And so let's just start a little bit about the period when you're making the choice. And then we'll go into some of the suggestions when you're actually in that pause, which I think are really important. But I don't think enough people talk about the active making of the choice. As we talked about earlier, there's a lot of figure it out. And then you end up in a situation where you're doing too much, or at least in my situation, and a lot of the women, I'd say about a third to maybe a half of the women we spoke to identified as this accidental traditionalist. This, again, those are the people who were, I'd say, identified as above working class. Working class women typically have always had to work. So I think that's an important piece of information, right? We're talking about people who do have this privilege. There's a lot of people out there who do not have a privilege, whether to take a pause ever, especially single parents. But if you do have that, a lot of people end up in this situation where they just can't handle it anymore, right? The school's calling them 100 times. All of a sudden they realize the workday ends at 5 and school days end at 3. I had so many people tell me they didn't realize that, even though they went to school. I'm like, I don't understand. You never planned for that 2-hour pause. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah. So then it got really hard because we didn't know who was going to pick up the kid. And then I did it because my job was more flexible. My partner made more money than me. Yeah. All these sort of toxic excuses In the time it would take me to tell him how to do that, I should just do it myself. I'm a better multitasker, whatever the excuse was that we found in Fair Play for why you end up in a figure it out mentality. That's how I think most people ended up in a pause. I won't call it power pause because there wasn't intention behind it. So how do we get people to understand that there's a decision to be made? Because you have a really important couple of chapters on that initial piece.
I think there's a few things just around the idea of this. I want to start with the privilege piece because I think that's an important part. Because for so long we've also haunted stay-at-home mothers with the idea that it's a luxury.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? This idea that if you are at home, then that is the ultimate luxury. And when we deem one side a luxury, we deem it not worthy of support. And then we fall into this trap, right? We fall into a trap of women not getting the support they need from a male. 60% of women in America are pausing their careers right now because of the cost of childcare. 1 in 3 women who are currently at home feel forced to be at home because of the cost of childcare, right? And it's important to call that out because it lays the foundation of this conversation as not one just for a privileged few.
Yep.
Because it's not to say that people working out of the home, it's a privilege. The privilege is to get to choose. So once you are making that choice, the next foundational part of this is this work has value, right? This work has tremendous value. We're not like sitting around eating bonbons. It's emotional, it's intellectual, it's physical. And when we have that mindset around care, then the big piece of this is, well, who's going to do that care? And how are we going to pay for that care? And ideally, you're having that with your partner. Ideally, you're having that 6 months ahead at a minimum, right? Because what you want to be doing, and I give my husband a lot of credit for this, he thinks that he should get a byline for this book because he feels like every chapter is written over a fight. But the one that I feel like he actually shines is the second chapter, where he came into our family. He was running a tech company at the time, and he took the P&L that he used for his business, income in, income out, based on priorities for this organization, and applied it to our family. And when we dignify our families as a household, it starts that conversation very early. And I did not love Excel, like very early on. And I thought this was like very nerdy and very uncomfortable. And I didn't love him scrutinizing my taxi habit. But equally, when it came time for me to then shift, we were having a very practical conversation about this is our organization. How do we want to run this organization? Oh, you're running a tech company right now and you are working around the clock and flying out. You need a security blanket. And guess who's providing you that security blanket of not having to worry about the child's care? It's me. And so because of that dialogue, we were able to enter this with a very clear mindset of we are an interdependent household. I'm not just depending on the income coming in. You are depending on the care work I'm doing. Our whole household benefits if we outsource the cleaning or we outsource, right? Like we, as a household, care and support does not just come out of the woman's salary. And this goes later into this idea of households deserve support. Whatever that support is at a time, it should come out of the household income. So I think that was, if there's one chapter I encourage people to read, it's
I agree. I love that chapter. And I think a lot of people talk about what the pause actually looks like, which I think is very important. But it's just the way you enter that pause can actually change your life. Because I know you probably know, but did you know that you took an economic risk when you had a child? Or when you're thinking about having a child? Because that's the first thing I say to any woman who says that they're about to get married. Congratulations, you're about to take a huge economic risk. And it usually doesn't work out well for you, right? So
she's coming off of a funeral. This is particularly weighty. It's
no, I'm always angry like this. But again, the narrative change is really the key to like you said, to have. I think the thing most important that women often tell me they don't have, and that's agency. And often the lack of agency comes up in different phases of their lives. And so I like to say, we're like the ghost of your Christmas future. At some point, there's going to be an inflection, where maybe you end up with a lack of agency. Maybe it's a divorce. And so many women end up in that situation where their work wasn't right.
And I want to actually chime in there because you and I did some work on that together.
Yes, we did.
Because I do think one of the many pieces of this book that are nuanced and you have to make your own is the relationship with our partner, right? Because a lot of that is instinct going in and saying, do we feel safe? Do we feel like this partner does risk? When I say we are an interdependent household, he's nodding along, or he is like, we have to gauge that. And because if that is not the case, that is a great time to not leave your job.
Right.
And or continue to have a dialogue around, well, how might we both make shifts? And or should we document this? We did work together, and you can still find it on motheruntitled.com around how to create a post-nup, because we talk a lot about organizations and treating your family like an organization. Then why not have a contract? If it can allow you to shore up your marriage, if it can allow you to step into this with more confidence, clarity around roles, clarity around what you can expect if the things go off the rails, I think is an important insurance policy. And I think that chapter is one to be handled on a personal level.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the more fun part, which is during the pause. You have a framework of 3 different things or more, but 3 different things that you that make it a power pause, not just a pause. So can you just talk a little bit about the framework?
Yeah. So, part of the preparation is remembering that this is a pause. It's not a period.
Right.
Right. A career pause is not a life pause. The biggest myth we've been fed is that our ambition and our feminism dries up if we pause our paid work. Ambition, by dictionary definition, is the determination to do things. That's it. No elaboration. You're going to do things, a great many things you care about over the long game of life. It is natural to shift that. It is a season. The real ambition is being able to align that with the needs and wants and ambitions of your family, and come back. With that in mind, you can't just step into parenthood and hope that it leads you to the next thing. I do think one of the pitfalls is that you step into at-home parenthood as it's been served up to us, and the sort of the archetype of that, and you think, well, I guess if my success metric is no longer my salary bump or my promotion, it must be my kids' behavior or how clean my house. And we all know that's a recipe for failure, right? So, it takes the first time your child is on the floor of Babies R Us screaming about the Bamba, that you realize, like I did, that this is not an appropriate way for me to measure the success of my day to day. And when I look back, how can I dignify this time in my life? Because Adam Grant will say, right, goals dignify time spent. So the first piece of it is, well, how can we redefine success for ourselves right now? Meaning you've been served up that end of year, end of quarter, annual review paperwork. You filled it out. You've written what you're expected to say. This is the first time you get to write, what do I really think success is? And you get a chance to say, if I look back in 5 years, well, I know I have done the things that moved me forward towards the vision I wanted. And a lot of people will say, well, what are goals? How do I come up with goals when I'm at home with my children?
That's why you buy the book.
You buy the book. Yeah. But if you do not buy the book, write in great detail who you're spending time with, what you're spending time on, how you feel in your body, how you feel in your house, how you feel within your relationship with your kids. And it's not to say you're going to be that overnight, but it starts to reveal to you, well, that's what I care about from a professional perspective. That's what I care about from a personal growth perspective. That's what I care about from a family values perspective. And then you can break it into tiny little incremental goals. And I can get, for me, it was reactivity, right? I had this portrait of myself in 5 years. I've not arrived yet. And it is, this very calm, unfazed human. And so I started listening to a podcast about anger in women once a week, because that's what I could do. Eventually it became therapy, right? And so, you break out those goals, but then you break it even further into what's possible in this stage of life. And over time, those seeds build towards a future state. I think part of that also relies on having time. Like, you still need time. Time is not imagined. And so the other big pieces of the book and that particular section is, how do you let go of what we think a stay-at-home mom is, right? Like, we have this vision of it being the super mom, that we are going to do all of the things based on the feed that we see of the perfect home, that we then compile with the
Yes,
person who's
yes.
cooking and the person who is advocating and the person who is well curated in her clothing and her birth, and you put it together and you're like, oh, that must be it. And the reality is, someone's letting go of something behind the scenes, right? Like, if you came to my feed 10 years ago, it was me doing arts and crafts with my kids. I was serving them chicken nuggets every single night because I was using naps and night times to work on this little blog called Mother Untitled, right? So everyone's giving something and figuring out, like, what can we let go of? And then that other big piece, which is the biggest myth holding at-home parents back, which is the idea that if you don't do paid work, you don't deserve support. And it held me back, even though I had the privilege to invest in help. But this idea that I have to do this on my own, if my entire value, if I paused my paid work to do this, then how can I have help? And what I missed was that being a present parent isn't just about the hours. It's about how you show up, right? And I got the privilege to interview a number of psychologists who were able to give me all the things
Yeah.
that I wish that I had heard back then.
I love that part of the book. It's very powerful.
Well, and it lets you remember that this isn't just, if you take one thing from that section, it's that when you pause your career for family life, you can also make room to grow alongside them. And that's the big piece of this reframing.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit. Oh, I'll just say one thing that I thought was funny. This psychologist, Tova Klein, she gave me this quote, don't let your unicorn space become the perfection of your children. So again, that's what you were just saying, right? There's a lot of when you lose your identity, again, not our fault in the context of a late stage capitalist patriarchy that relies on the unpaid labor of women. It's almost inevitable that you will lose your identity, and so the reclaiming of it is, I think, the power right here, because you just have to assume that that's what's going to happen. So I think in this phase of the book, when you're talking about sort of coming back to yourself and growth, how do you look at growth differently now than you may have thought you were looking at it 5 years ago?
Mm,
And do you feel like you're growing?
I do. I do feel like I'm growing. I do feel like I haven't taken an intentional pause, so I haven't put pen to paper on what my next version of success looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's not to say that I'm going to shut it all down and, like, go back, but it does mean that I found so much value in the exercise of stepping away from what I was told success was, to re-examine and rewrite that for myself. And I haven't done that in a while because, as you know, when you have a goal line, and for me, the goal line was putting this book out into the world, there were very clear success metrics. And I've been so focused on those that I'm slowing down in April to, like, really be able to rewrite it for myself. So do I believe that I'm learning and I'm absorbing, but I haven't had the space for a little while to redefine what I want it to look like.
It's also really hard because when you're working on a perennial issue that will never fucking go away, like men not doing unpaid labor, or men doing unpaid labor, or the guilt and shame and narrative that is associated with a pause, then you can burn out. So how do sort of when it's a perennial issue, this is not going away and you want to continue to spread your message. What does that look like in each phase? So, you sort of talk about all the intention, and you give some really great exercises. So what would that look like to you to say, like, I can pause from now the irony, right, is that you have intense work in front of you. You still have childcare needs. So what do you do now to sort of allow yourself some space?
So I have taken my entire life, and I say this in the book too, to women who are at the precipice of any big transition. I've taken it in 6-month increments after kids, because our children's needs are changing anyways, and the rhythms in our home are changing, and my husband's relationship to work and my parents' health, everything is changing.
I love that.
And so I'll tell you that I stepped into the fall of 2024. And my husband and I will do money meetings at the beginning of the year. And then we have an admin meeting where we basically go over like how much, because we're at a stage with our kids, we don't need like full time, we have a babysitter. So how many days, who's doing pickup when? It's kind of that meeting. And, fall 2025, it was a little bit of me saying, there's going to be a 2024, there's going to be a lot of times where I say, I need to be on a plane. And this is how it's going to go. And I'm going to need you, Dan, to do what I did for you for 8 years. And that worked. But it came with a moment to recalibrate. And I committed to by the way, we looped my kids into that conversation, not into sort of the granular back and forth of who's like how me and Dan were going to handle this, but who's picking up when, how much I'd be traveling. And I said to all 3 of them, and we're all going to figure this out again in March. We're going to take spring break. We're going to it was spring break in New York the last 2 weeks. We're going to really disconnect, and I'm going to be fully at home with you guys. I mean, we went fully away with you guys. And then we're going to come back, and I'm going to figure it out again. And this is my only travel commitment for April. And I'm really trying to take April to just reflect on what I heard from the community on the tour. What worked, what didn't work, what I'm enjoying, what I'm not enjoying. The one thing I refuse to do is just do what everyone else is doing. Like when I started this, it was because there was so much great content around the traditional working parent, and it counted an entire cohort of women out. And so when I started, that was it. We were the first, the only, the biggest, and I wanted to be unique and put this book out there, not to be another book, but to really put something out there that I wanted. And so now I want to make sure that I'm not just doing to do. I want to make sure whatever it is unique. And what's interesting this time is that one thing I said about April is to really look at my kids' needs, my needs, and my husband's needs, and put those, and then figure out what's possible on the work front around that.
I love that. And tell me about, I want to talk about pride, because we were talking a little bit about earlier about it sort of being defined sort of through the eyes of others. You talk a lot about how easy it was for you to say what you did before you took the pause, right? I'm in a tech startup, I do market or whatever, you said. So there's sort of pride and you talk about, what do you do? And there maybe that there's false pride in being able to say I am or I do X. So what do you think of as pride now? Like outside of your roles? Like, I'm proud to be a mother. I'm proud to, be a partner. But like, what is pride for a woman who has taken a power pause or who's thinking about one?
What's interesting is it's so much more expansive. I think the superpower I left my time fully at home with. And by the way, not just in my years fully, because I initially downshifted and I was part-time, and then I was at home. Then I was at home without help, and then I was at home with part-time help, and then I was at home with no help, and then I was at home with a small project alongside, and then that project grew, and now I'm mostly out of the home. But except the superpower I left that period with is perspective on what really matters, and that you can keep doing work you care about in different forms, and no one can take that away from you. The scarcity of my 20s, my 30s, that sense of like, I can be the only one who can do this. And if I don't, I'm going to lose this once in a, you know why I realized that? Because if I think back, I had Bodhi in 2016, and I came up with this idea at the end of 2016, and it was January 10th, 2017 when I put it out. And I started looking around, and there was all of these big, the working mother communities were thriving. And I was looking at them being like, but this is a big mission too. And no one understood, no one got it, because they were like, oh, that cute little mom blog, like, she's so sweet. And I was being like, but it's a game changing platform around like women in career, but okay. And timing was everything. 2021 rolled around and the pandemic, there was so much reexamination of work and family, and my kids aged into school, and I was ready. And I think it really taught me to trust the timing of it. It taught me that you can do work you care about in different ways that work, and that it's a long freaking game.
I love the idea that there's a scarcity mindset out there, and what does abundance look like? And I love that you're defining that as pride. That your it sounds like your pride is in the process, not any outcome.
And the whole, like the pride, I hate that word whole because it's like presence. Like I don't really understand what it fully means. I'm like, whole, but like I think it's this like I think it's the fully enjoying as much as you possibly can exactly where you are.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's my that's
So
the
no
pride.
regrets.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's what I
think
meant.
I think that's really interesting. I love, and I'll just ask one last question because this is where our work intersects in my first book, Fair Play. As you mentioned it a little bit earlier, when not to take a pause,
Mm-hmm.
or when you took that pause and it was a mistake.
Yeah.
Pause, because there was maybe not the structural supports around you with, or maybe it's a hetero cisgender partner who said, you can do this fun thing on the side, but don't expect me to take on any more unpaid labor. Or maybe you took that pause and now you're in a divorce with somebody who in a court. This is what I'm fighting for now. All the family law courts who say you were eating bonbons all day and you made the choice to do housework and it's worth zero when you need financial support at the end of that. So can you talk a little bit about the risks of the pause?
Yeah, I think that's the big one. I think that I go back to it is such a deeply personal decision to make a shift in your career, but it has to be a team decision in the case of a partnership and a family. And in any organization, you would not step into a situation or a change if you didn't feel respected and safe. And it's hard to predict those circumstances. I 10 out of 10 recommend women to trial different options. I think the real opportunity here isn't just like fully dignifying. I mean, the real work I want to do is not just dignify intellectual and emotional labor of caregiving so women are respected on the other side of making a choice like pausing, but really open up the vast gray area, right? So that if a woman says, you know what, we want more options. So maybe I don't want to fully pause yet. And maybe I want to try a 2-day a week, 3-day a week role. And maybe I know I'm craving 87% of women will pause their career because they want more time with their kids. Maybe you can achieve that in a different way. So what are the other permutations of achieving that? And so that, I guess, outside of the financial risk that comes with your partnership, which we've talked about, I really want to destigmatize post-nups because I think it's a great option to allow marriages to be able to thrive. It's not a bet against your marriage. It's saying I'm putting myself in a vulnerable position and I would feel safer if I just know. Obviously, that's very personal to the relationship, but there are conversations in the book in that chapter that should be had regardless. But I think the only other piece, the risk that really exists for women is that they haven't explored all their other options to stay connected to their industry if they care about that industry, right? Like for a number of women, they're using this as their reset. Like I don't think it's a great mystery as to why women are often pausing around the age of 40. Like they've clocked in X amount of years. They're looking for a way in which to recalibrate. They say burnout. They're saying, I just want to figure out what comes next. And it also collides with needs and wants with my family. I think there's another side of the women who have really loved what they do, really care deeply about it and want to make it work and can't. And I think that's where I want to see more options on the table and more time spent trying to get to those options. My real goal, if I could do one thing next when we're talking about what comes next, what I have really heard a lot is this idea of like, if we can just trade options, right? Like creating a big brain trust where we put all the options on the table. I was in Dallas and this woman at JP Morgan, HSBC, said, I figured out a 2-day-a-week work week at HSBC, and I was like, "Oh my God!" When I started this work 8
No,
years ago,
no,
that was
no,
like
it's
not happening.
Yeah.
And I said, "How did you do it?" And she said, "I called a friend who had figured out a 2-day-a-week work week at JP Morgan, and I got her template, and I took that
Love
template
it
to
so
my
much.
manager, and that's how I made it work." And the reality is, we need to just get so clear on how we make it work. All the ways, the 2-day, the 3-day, the flex, how much childcare we have. And if we can get honest about that, we give women more options to negotiate more ways to stay
I love
connected.
that. That's absolutely your next, and then hopefully you'll continue to get a love of Excel so you can put them all
I
in there.
know.
But I think that's a great place to end. But I do want to say that Jane Fraser, who's the CEO of Citibank, that's her story.
Yeah.
That she stumbled upon a manager who allowed her.
Mhm.
And I truly believe that I wouldn't have become the accidental traditionalist if I hadn't had such a hostile manager who insisted on 5 days a week in office at this financial institution I was at the time. So yeah, you don't want it to be by luck.
Yes.
Like Jane Fraser's story is by luck in a lot of ways. And so, but like what you're saying, by intention. So thank you for changing this narrative and really making it intentional choices. Your book is very, very powerful. Very happy to be here with you. And I know there's probably some questions from the audience. We have about, 10, 15 minutes. So do you have questions? I'll give you a free book if you ask first. Yes, great. We love it.
She took you up on the front.
Okay, good. Yes. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Wondering what your thoughts on are the whole like rise of the traditional wife that's like happening on social media, especially for like the younger generations, and like the rise and like trying to spin back to like the 70s and how things were then to yeah.
You mean when we didn't own bank accounts when women 1974 was I always ask my kids, when do you think the first year was when women could own bank accounts without a husband or father? And my kids are like the 1900s because they think that was like the Stone Ages. So I'm like, yeah, you're right, the 1900s. Yeah.
It feels like the 1900s. So I have a pretty visceral reaction to it because when I first saw it, it just felt like it threatened all this incredible work we've done to shed the tropes and shed the stereotypes, right? Because what it starts to do is it starts to create that association again between
June Cleaver,
creating home and apron strings and martyrdom and servitude. And the reality is these women are making bank. Like they are making bank off of their sourdough. And it's this like tiny population that have discovered a hashtag that allowed their content to be highly discovered and highly monetized. And media loves a cat fight. And we just like full circle. And so we've glommed back onto it. And I think it's really on us to be able to not give it as much airtime than it's an aesthetic. Right? It's like country coastal. Like think of it, whatever. Nancy Myers. Like think of it as that. Like that is one aesthetic that those influencers are choosing to market. And it is not a representation of the reality of modern, ambitious women looking to create long and sustainable careers and lives.
Great answer. Hope we get that.
I'll say, it's funny, in your book, you talk about June Cleaver, and I was walking and listening to it with my child and my dog. And I'm like, but June Cleaver was working, making that show. Like, she was a working actor. And I'm like, how did she feel? Like, she's getting paid. She's not like on a studio lot, like playing this archetype. Anyway, so I had this
very
like
similar,
moment of like, even she had to work to play that role.
Right.
But I wanted to ask you, you talk a lot about how women need support no matter, what their financial situation is, and it shouldn't just all be on the mother and the woman, and couldn't agree more. And also, what do you think about like, just as a mother being completely like burned out in terms of creativity? Like all your creativity goes to your children and your husband and you're in the family, and like, the little scraps go back to you and like the life that you lived before you were the mother. And so like everything comes last for us to muscle and, tune that, flex that muscle. So what would you say, like, how do we keep the weights going?
So I'm gonna chime in, but Eve wrote a whole book on it too. It's called "Find Your Unicorn Space." So, when I tell people, have you gotten to chapter 4 yet?
Yeah, like 2 minutes.
Okay, great. I think that one of the best things I did, and why I started that section with goal setting. Goals sound really contrived, but I think when you get intentional that this time is yours too, it then allows you to say, okay, then when I'm looking at my rhythms and my routines, how do I factor, where is that time coming from? And when I look at my help with my husband and my partner, right, for a while when we didn't have paid help, it was my husband was waking up with the kids so I could get 6 to 7:30, right? Or I was not cleaning the house and we were doing chicken nuggets because I was using naps and night times, right? Or I brought in an after school, because that investment in that line item, if you are investing in paid care or unpaid, is an investment in the entire family being whole and healthy. And I know that word is like sort of like what does that mean? But I think it's whatever allows you to enjoy this time. And that might be, okay, these are my goals for this time. And one of my goals from a creative perspective, I'd been trying to squash in editorial into my job title for years. No one let me. So I finally was like, no one's holding me back. I can now do this blog that, no one's going to understand, but I can do it. And it was, I'm going to do this in a small way, 3 times a week on a free platform. And, I think the other thing that motherhood gets terrible PR. And I think part of that, like, entire last section of the book is how do we use it to actually unlock the parts, like what comes next. And one of my favorite anecdotes is this woman, I tell everyone beyond the like chapter 4, write your 5-year ideal and then back into your goals, is that write like in your iPhone notes or a Google Doc, like a ticker of all the things that light you up, the conversations, the content that makes you linger on Instagram, that time you volunteered and like that made you feel proud, or the time you like advised your husband on or partner on something and he took the idea and it worked. Because what it does is it does 2 things. It reveals what you're interested in as you like look back at those dots. And when you return, as you put together that like career sabbatical for family life, all the sub bullets, it starts to actually paint, like you can actually extract from it really interesting points. And there was this woman in North Carolina who organized a bus route for her kids because her kids just weren't getting picked up very often. And like it was a faulty system. She reorganized it just because she's a mom who needed her kids picked up. And she put it down in her iPhone notes because at the end she was proud. And when she looked back, she saw it and was like, wait a second, I love project management. I had no idea. It ended up that she double clicked on that, took like a master class in it, volunteered, and so that she could build out that portfolio. And later when she returned, she put it on her resume as like, facilitated highly technical infrastructure change to local organization, right? Like, but this point of like self-studying, but also taking those goals seriously and allowing those to have space in your calendar and get support.
I like the 3 S's: serious, self-study. I think that's a beautiful thing to say. And I love that part of the book too. I think one really important thing is to remember that creativity is not optional. We look at it as like a Maslow's hierarchy and somehow it's like, oh, way up here. It's actually not optional. And I'll explain why. Like after interviewing, dozens of mental health professionals to try to get an answer of what actually is mental health, I came upon an answer that I love. And now my kids say it everywhere. My mom doesn't want me to be happy. Yeah. I'm like, well, just finish the fucking sentence if you're going to say that. So I know I don't have any interest in happiness, which is what I tell them, because that has nothing to do with mental health. What mental health is, and it's been hijacked, similar like the trad wife thing. We have all these happiness books that just sort of, and happiness courses. I love Laurie Santos, but I'm like, what is Yale doing with the happiness course when that's actually, it's proven that if you try to search for happiness, you actually become more sad. The definition of mental health is having appropriate emotions, which for a lot of young mothers, at least for me, was mostly rage and resentment. Appropriate emotions at appropriate times, which was always, and yet having the ability and strength to weather those emotions. The third thing is why creativity is not optional. You're going to weather the appropriate emotions. It's just whether you want to do it hedonically, which is the mommy juice culture, which is people who told me and more, they take edibles all weekend to get through being with their children, which I get it. It's actually, there's a big happiness survey that shows getting a root canal is more enjoyable than hanging out with children, which is 100% my experience with my children. And so there's just, you're going to cope with those, again, rage, resentment, whatever the emotions are, sadness, anxiety, loneliness, but how do you want to cope with them? So you'll doom scroll, you can binge watch TV, you can have mommy juice, you can use edibles. I'm not saying any of those are bad things. I've all done them all. I've emotionally ate my way through the pandemic. But why creativity is not optional is because if you understand this is the bottom of the hierarchy, because it's about if you have appropriate emotions at appropriate times, you have to have the ability and strength to weather those emotions. And the ability and strength and to weather those emotions is tied to your creative pursuits. And so when you look at it that way, there's 3 C's that come in to define creativity, and that's curiosity. So this is what Neha did, right? I'm curious about this whole lane of women that are ignored. The second C is connection. You have to share yourself with the world. So she had to do a blog because you can say you're curious, but that's not enough. You need the sharing yourself with the world component, which is the scary part. Nobody wants to share themselves with the world, right? It's why it's not a soul cycle class. You can teach soul cycle, but it's not the class because you're not sharing yourself with the world. You have to be scared. And then the third is completion. As one woman said to me, she became a graveyard of unfulfilled dreams. And she knew that because her GoDaddy kept coming up every year. And it would be all these amazing websites that she wanted to start and registered, and she never did it, right? She had the curiosity, she had the connection, but she never had a completion point because we all think completion has to be perfection. And that is, again, due to being in a late stage capitalist patriarchy, not our fault. So I think understanding the context that of course you're going to feel like you have no time for creativity. But once you realize that it's actually not optional because it's the key to weathering those emotions, and that is what mental health is, then you do what Neha does. You actually open those books and you start to set those goals. But it's about, I think, starting to understand that this is the key to your mental and physical health. And unfortunately, too long, we've called this work hobby. Or a side hustle, or that's so cute, your little blog. No, it's really, you can say now, this is the key to my mental and physical health. And so I'm going to take my trapeze class. That, and it is what it is. My kids and my partner will have to figure that shit out.
Yeah, that's like another thing you and I have connected on, this idea of like
yes.
diminishing women's projects. Right?
Diminishing women's projects. We talk about it all the time.
Women's projects, because I do think it holds a lot of women back from
absolutely
putting their ideas out there, even in small ways. And the number of women who one of the greatest privileges of being able to exist in this modern time is the access to all of these free tools and resources. Like take Instagram, and the number of women who say, I would love to tinker with this thing, but then I'll be that person with like the Instagram thing.
Or
and you're like, then
two
great
followers, it's not perfect.
And I think we've really dumbed down, by the way, this entire industry that is like a huge part of our economy now. And so allowing ourselves to take that exploration seriously and tune into our interests. But I would say entrepreneurship is it doesn't always have to be big. There's so many forums where we can express creativity, and it doesn't have to be linear. You can test and learn. It doesn't always have to be like, I happened on something I cared about and I built it, but it took 10 years. It doesn't have to be overnight. And I think that's also, so important that it looked very non-impressive for a very long time.
Thank you.
Questions?
I have a question. It's like half compliment, half question.
Love that. Love a compliment. Words of affirmation.
Yes.
I'm a big words of affirmation person.
I one of the reasons why I love your book is because I feel like in a culture of having to choose what type you are, anything, right? Like I have a newborn second child right now who it's like, are you doing baby-led weaning or are you doing spoon
Oh,
fed?
God,
Or are
right.
you doing, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just gonna feed her. Like,
Yeah.
right? But even down to the granularity of what you feed your kids, you're having to choose what like category you're in, right? And I love that your book has like opened it up to this place where like I consider myself a very ambitious, modern, career-driven woman who also like had a very visceral reaction, admittedly, to Chapel Road. Don't want to stir any pots in here, but went on the Call Her Daddy podcast this week and said all my friends with kids are miserable and hate their children, and like I don't want to be a mom because they all seem like they hate their lives. I totally understand why a young person in their 20s would believe that, right? I though was like, damn, I kind of like mine. Like I think we're doing okay. I like being a mom. And I just, so that's my compliment, is I love that your book allows you to like be whatever you want to be in that space, right? Like I love my Nancy Meyers situation. I love cooking. I love wine. And I'm also the first person to be like, husband, I am not doing that. You're doing that. Like, and I love that you've made it label-less in a way because I'm just sick of us having to choose what box we fit in. So my question now is, do you feel like you've had to grapple with that even throughout this journey of like, now I'm like, you know, when like you're at work and you feel like you're doing great at work because you're screwing up everything at home, or if you're really killing it at home, that means you've dropped a million balls at work. Like, do you feel like you're constantly doing that right now on your own journey, or do you think you've really settled on the fact of like, I'm just made up of 150 parts and it's, I don't know. This is not
No, it's very
stated question, but
I get it. I hear the question, and it's funny because, you know, I say at the end of the book that if I do my job right, when my daughter grows up, if someone asks her, "Did you have a stay-at-home or working mom?" she'll have no idea what they're talking about. And I think about that a lot. You know, and I feel really clear about that why. I do try, and I think that I have really compartmentalized the months and the years, and I've really, I took that really seriously. So when I like come March 13th, I put my pencil down and I was out for 2 weeks, and I don't think that's sustainable, like that full break. And so there's a little bit of test and learn. And when I feel like things aren't feeling comfortable, you know how we talked about like making a plan for 6 months? I like shorten that window. So we were talking about like, what's it going to look like? I'm taking it week to week in April and seeing like, how does this system work? Like if I plan on, you know, I shed some, like tactically speaking, I let go of my office space that I'd invested in for a while because I'm like, I don't need that additional weight. I want to slim down on some of that investment and some of that because it was sort of chunking up my day. And I want to be able to, so I'm trying to tinker and constantly recalibrate. And when I don't have a full clarity as to how it's going to feel for 6 months, I take it in shorter increments of time. But I really trust my family's ability to move through the shifts and to be able to communicate around it. And I really trust my perspective that I'll be okay if I put my pencil down at 4:30 p.m. and this work still keeps going as long as it is done in a way that works for me.
But it's interesting, as you say, shortening the chunks. It means that you have like intuitively an understanding of what feels safe and comfortable and good.
Yes. And I love, I mean, I overthink as like a if overthinking was a profession, that would be like, this book is my overthinking, this stage of life for you, you know? And so I really like doing that reflection on how it's feeling. And I feel comfortable adjusting when it feels uncomfortable.
And there's really
Because
some good
you
exercises.
get to recalibrate over and over again. And that's the whole point of the pot. Like, it's not forever. And I think one of the most freeing things, the 2 words was right now, right? Like, and which I got to because when someone asked me what do you do and I word vomited on them the first 5 times, then I finally was like, well, what do I say? And I found a lot of freedom in being able to say right now, I get to be with my kids. We'll see what comes next. What was really hard was when people started asking me, like, I now word vomit. So I'm like, what do I do? I don't know. Like, I want to say that because any transition is hard.
Yeah.
And so I'll say right now, I'm working on putting my book out into the world. We'll see what comes next. And just that feels helpful.
And you can recalibrate the exercises in the book too.
I'm going back. I
Mhm.
was working on chapter 4, my redefinition of success on the plane here.
You had a question.
Yes. Partly just answered about you saying, right now I get to be with my kids. What comes next? I was like, that's a good response when people ask what you do. Because obviously, like when you're new to it, you stutter and you're so confused. But I was just telling my friend in the car, like I did that anyways when people asked me what I did. I was like, it's so obnoxious.
Mhm.
Okay. I had a career, recently left it a year ago, but I had already like been a working mom. So now I have the perspective of what that looks like. Like I didn't just leave when I was going on that leave. I went back to work, like my dream job. So I thought. And like I was heartbroken that it just wasn't sustainable as a mom. And then also had a different perspective and like have no interest in that life anymore. So what's funny is everyone asks, of course, what do you do? And then they get uncomfortable when you say you're a stay-at-home mom, or I say like I'm a nanny for my daughter. I'm my daughter's nanny. But then it's like women get uncomfortable, so then they try to like hype you up as if you need that.
Yeah.
They're like, but that's the hardest.
Oh. I could never do that.
I could never do
Oh,
that.
that's
I
the
would
worst.
die.
I would die. Like I'm
get
too
so bored.
complicated.
I feel like shame in being like, I was dying before. Like, and I'm also like self-aware enough to be like, I have one child. She's 2.5. Like, I have so much to learn and like more kids to have and more chaos. Like, I'm sure at some point I will want to die. but for right now, it's like awkward for me to be like, no, like it's really not that hard. Like it was way harder for me before, and I like give you working moms like so much credit. Like I was dying, like I couldn't even like was not functioning. I'm not functioning human. But it's like it's like this weird like trying to support each other, but at the same time it's like hard. I don't know how to respond because I feel like it's obnoxious and like toxic positivity to be like, no, like I love not working. It's pretty awesome. And like, I keep myself busy with my daughter. Like and what also I thought before stay-at-home mom was like you're staying at home.
You're not
like,
staying
which
at
is so silly. Like I think also that's what people assume that I'm doing is like staying at home, like with our like ring toys and like alphabet puzzles, which we're not doing. Like we're going out and about and like classes and like I get to talk to so many moms, like and have this whole new network of people. And like I have so many adult conversations. And like a lot of people have no idea what I did a year ago. So like there's so much positive and like, I guess this is more of a conversation, but it's like how to respond to people who like, I don't know, like it's like it's like obnoxious of me to be like so positive about like me not working in the fashion industry anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and like I like don't have any shame in that, but it's like, you know, it's like it's so much easier for me right now.
Right now.
I will admit that I have no idea what tomorrow will bring.
I think you can say
awkward.
that. I love that part. And I also think that I'm glad they're having that conversation. It might be, look, we're all relearning a lot. I'm actually really pleased that they're even trying to sort of dig deeper because one of the worst things I think between women and men is if someone asks what you do and you say you're at home with your kids, they walk away or they just like don't know what to say. So then the conversation ends because you've become invisible to them because what do you do has come to stand in for who are you in this culture. And then if you don't have a pithy title to explain yourself, then you seem like relatively a stay-at-home mom for all the reasons we've discussed, sort of implies like your brain has died. And like when in reality, your network is expanding, you're having interesting conversations, you're exploring interests that may lead you eventually, you're enjoying. I'm very similar to you. Now, mind you, I had a different, my transition to 2 was a little harder. Everyone has their different journeys. But yeah, there were parts of motherhood that were totally joyful, and it opened up I think I paused. And I'm very clear about this. I paused because I wanted to figure out this new version of myself. I really loved being curious again about how this little brain was going to work. And that was interesting to me. I actually feel very comfortable being on the road now because they're less interesting to me at this current moment. They're very cool, but they're a little scary. They're like, the teens are just different. They're different little people. I love them so much. But I'm happy with a little healthy independence now. But in the time, there were seasons that that were very similar to you. I loved those years. And I think having a conversation where you own that, it doesn't have to be obnoxious. And I think part of the reason motherhood gets bad PR, and Chappell Roan will say that, I don't fault Chappell Roan, because the reality is we are penalized either way. If we are positive, if we're complaining, you're like, oh, she's so whingy. And if you're positive, you're like, oh, she's so fake. But just be you. You're going to be damned if you are, damned if you. So just do you. And so I think I used to say, if I remember it, I'm actually really enjoying it. We'll see what comes next. And then get curious about, I think the best thing we can do is just get curious about each other, because I look at the data, 1 in 3 women working out of the home right now will pause their careers in the next 2 years. 1 in 2 will downshift their working hours in the next 2 years. 90% of the women who are currently on pause will return. So we are all more alike than we are different. So actually getting curious about what they're doing, allowing those inroads between each other, because they will be your on-ramp back. Those connections are powerful. I think being able to share something interesting that you are enjoying, you should feel empowered to do that, because that's how we change the narrative too.
So good.
I had a quick question more about on the process. So in your interviews and working with different women, and I haven't read the book yet, I'm very excited to read it. But how would you give advice to non-neurotypical women? So women who struggle with structure, like ADHD or addiction, right? Where it's you need that work day or that structure to kind of get around and about with your family dynamic, something around that change, or it's a huge change, just be at home all the time and trying to figure out what your day looks like.
Yeah. Chapter 5 is really strong for that.
Okay.
I interviewed a number of time management experts for that section, because I do think there's sort of foundational ways in which to structure routines. I do think for the neurotypical adults, I would suggest, have you met Casey Davis with Struggle Care?
Yeah, I love her.
I think that she does a really good job of really diving into that particular piece. I think around routines, a lot of it is about creating blocks of time around the things you care about. Routines sound really complicated, but in the end, it's about eating and sleeping, right? Meal times and sleep times, and having some way in which to structure your day so that there's predictability, but leaving wiggle room where possible. For me, you might pick one thing that gives you energy that you're going to do in the morning that feels productive, and then you're going to leave it really, but allowing yourself some predictable flow is really the foundational bedrock. But being able to, the sort of prescriptive nature of how to design that for different family styles, we get into in that chapter. But I think in the case of anyone with neurotypical issues, I really suggest Casey. Do you have other people?
Yeah, I think she's wonderful, and she's coming out with a new book. But yeah, just follow her, and her first book has really addressed a lot of these issues.
How to keep house while drowning. So she actually battled ADHD and addiction.
Yeah, and addiction, yeah.
And she has a podcast too.
So I don't have a question, but I couldn't leave here tonight just without thanking you for giving so many women, including myself, this new sense of confidence during this really transformational period in our lives. I know all women go through, different things, whether it's taking a pause when they first had a child. Sometimes it's, you've been working for a while and then you decide, like myself, I've done the super mom stuff. And I feel like the right thing for me is to take some time and not just prioritize my family, but prioritize my health. And I think for women, it's your health is so important, and you can't be there for your kids. You can't be there for yourself or your family without taking care of yourself first. And you really, I think when you take that time, whatever it is that you're doing, even if you downshift or you, decide to just take full time, that focus, that shift with your family and for yourself, it can just make such a huge difference. I'm in that period of returning back to work full time. I took time to focus on my health and my family. And during that time, when I did that is when I signed up for your newsletter. So I know that we're here for the book, but I just want to share with you that before this book even came out, I feel like I got a really good preview and little tidbits of the book because of that Sunday night newsletter that you give to us, which I think really is a fresh start to the week, especially for those that were in that period of transition and looking at, that confidence and just knowing that you do matter, you do have a sense of identity, and that your, work professional life is not your entire identity. And I think we're raised that way sometimes to, reach that goal of success, of getting that high-powered job and doing it all. And, I think doing it all is different for different people, and it's not just a certain way. I also love your mother classes.
I'm so glad. Did you see Dr. Morgan Cutlip in one of them?
Yeah.
She's sitting right behind you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, she's a celebrity.
Sometimes when you see them in real life, it's great.
Oh my God.
So I
love
think-
your work,
I
Morgan.
think that they've just been, you've done them where it's like 20 minutes, easy to, be able to just watch them and kind of catch, especially with the identity shifts and everything. So I don't have a specific question at this point.
That's so kind.
But I just want you to know that, that's why I'm here today. I'm a local. I'm from Santa Monica. I grew up here. And I was just so happy to hear that you were literally not that far from us to, out of all Los Angeles areas, you picked, here. But I will just say that I think that part with your kids, also for me is really important. I'm noticing that the what do you do, question that you get from everybody. I feel like I'm more comfortable with that. I'm working with a career coach too, by the way. So I feel like there are a lot of things you can do. I feel like I was able to be comfortable with a career coach because you were mentioning resources and things that women can do as next steps. This is before the book came out. So I started working with one, and I felt like it was just really, really great for kind of making that next step. And I'm still in transition, but I just want to thank you.
Well, congratulations. I mean, you navigated, you're such an example. I think that's what the best part of this work and the best part of this tour is getting to meet women that make the movement, right? I think these are the new, when I think about why this work was important, it was because we were fed this sort of black and white narrative, and we had no representation of the very real women that are so powerful, that are playing the long game, that are navigating with intention and with confidence. And by the way, doing the work to do it. I think career coaching, we expect to be able to navigate transitions with no plans or no support. And it does take practice. Even answering that question, what do you do? People think it's going to roll off your tongue. I talk about it in the book. You need scripts. So much of this book is scripts because I think language shapes the way we walk through the world. It shapes the way people perceive us. And so I'm so glad you invested in someone to help tell your story on the other side, because it's an important resource.
Along with your help.
I'm glad.
All right, we're allowed one more question. Does anybody have? Oh, yes.
Thank you so much for your book, Neha. It's really been powerful in my life as well. I wanted to ask, I know you talked a lot about setting goals for yourself and how that can be really important in finding value in what you're doing every day. I know when we've all set goals, at work, you have a lot of external validation for things going well and even things that you need to improve. But if you're at home mostly, then that can be something really hard to get or impossible. And I think that internal validation is a really powerful tool that we all need to work on, and it creates a lot of value in our own lives. But you also talked about how things change so much and like are shifting and are very dynamic in this world of being with your kids every day. So when you don't necessarily meet all the goals that you set yourself, and you set them on your own vision on exactly what you want your life to be, so it feels like there's so much writing on it, right? But you don't necessarily meet them. Like, do you have any advice for how to shift that narrative around like, I'm not necessarily a failure, or I'm still working towards these goals, and it's okay to like redefine what they can be for women who have had to shift into setting those for themselves.
We have to hold the reality of family life. Going into family life with a plan is just, I mean, there's so much changing. There's so many factors changing. And I think we can go in with intention, and we can also know that this is a complicated, dynamic stage of life. And so if we don't write 3 blog posts every single week because you have shingles and your 2 children are vomiting and there's no childcare and your husband's decided to go fundraise again because that happened to me. Yeah, that happens, you know, and the time continues, and you can figure out, well, how can I tweak this to make it more doable? What does it tell me about where I need more time or space? I think oftentimes when we are missing these very things that we want for ourselves, it's because there's something missing structurally, right? And I think it's not necessarily throw up your hands and say it's all a failure and I shouldn't have goals. It's how can I better tweak, adjust maybe what is possible for right now, but also what can I ask for support in to make this more realistic if it's still what I want. So I wouldn't think of it as a missed goal as much as like a moment to reflect on how to tweak moving forward. Do you have more to add there?
No, I think that's a perfect way to end. I think your time is diamond, so we want to make sure we're on time. You have time to sign.
I do.
So anybody who purchased the book, you will get it personalized by Neha. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
everything. Yes.